Thank you, everybody, for coming and joining us for the Women, Psychedelics, and the Rising of the Divine Feminine Masterclass. I know some of you on the call. For those of you I don't know, my name is Dana Harvey. I am a psychedelics educator and facilitator. I run the organization Flourish Academy, and I'm also a facilitator and head of communications and partnerships with gathering groups. And for those of you who don't know what gathering groups is it's a 2-night psilocybin retreat model, but it uniquely incorporates 8 weeks of slow titrated preparation before the psilocybin retreat, making sure everybody's nervous systems are calm, that we know how to receive the somatic and the emotional language, if you'd call it, of the mushrooms. We bring in things like breath work, somatic presencing, mindfulness, things to get us really safe and prepared for that 2-night psilocybin journey. And then on the other side, we have 4 weeks in our small groups of integrating together as well. So it's not like you're just plonked into a group and then go and make sense of it on your own. Like, safety is our number one priority. And that's why we have this 12-week model for a 2-night psilocybin small group retreat. And uniquely, gathering groups also has what's known as a 2-eyed seeing approach. So we take the best of the Western science-backed, evidence-based knowledge, and we integrate that together with Indigenous leadership and teachings, land-based ways of healing. So, and one final thing, I think gathering groups are always facilitated by at least one registered clinical counselor, meaning if you have extended medical benefits, this is eligible for extended benefits as well. So we're going to talk a little bit more about gathering groups. We're going to introduce ourselves more fully as we go along. I'm here presenting today with Heather Peters. She is the co-founder of Gathering Groups. And we've called this a masterclass, but we have really debated on that. And Heather and I are way more comfortable calling it a community conversation, because neither of us really feel like we're masters in this realm. We just have a lot of experience working with women and psychedelics. We have experienced a lot of things. We have a lot of research and science backing up what we have witnessed and experienced. But we're not the masters. We're not the experts. We just want to host a conversation that centers women and centers the divine feminine in the conversation. So help us be more comfortable by calling it a community conversation rather than a masterclass. So to kick off, I'd love to just take a moment to get really present together. We've all come from different energies, different days. Heather and my nerves are a little bit up. Invite you to join us in just a moment of getting present. So if it feels comfortable and safe for you to maybe close your eyes or gaze down with a relaxed focus. And just take a moment to become aware of your breath. So just start to notice your breath as you inhale and you exhale. Notice the contractions, the expansions. And maybe even start to deepen your breath, slowing down your heart rate, getting more oxygen. And then let's just turn our attention towards gratitude and just take a moment to express gratitude to yourself. Thank you, self, for showing up here tonight on a beautiful sunny evening with curiosity and open minds. Extending that gratitude out to the other people on this call, other people watching the replay. Just thank you all. So much gratitude for the collective interest and passion around the divine feminine and women. Gratitude to our ultimate mother, Mother Earth, who gifts us with sacred plant medicines to expand our consciousness, to heal and to grow. Gratitude for the land that each of us is on. Most of us here in North America, peaceful countries, with the blessing of being on unceded Indigenous territories for many of us. I want to acknowledge that I'm on the land of the Coast Salish people, the Squamish, the Tsleil-Waututh, and the Musqueam nations. And just gratitude to our elders, to those who've come before us, and to the Indigenous peoples of all our lands who have, over time, shared the beauty and the mystery of these plant medicines with us. And when you feel comfortable and ready, I invite you to open your eyes and come back into the present moment. Thank you for joining me in that. That is actually one small example of a practice that we use in gathering groups. Our 12 sessions are very ritualized and trauma informed, and this is a practice that harnesses 3 tools that can be really beneficial for any kind of psychedelic work and preparation. So it harnesses our breath, the power of our breath. It harnesses mindfulness, and it brings in the practice of gratitude, which science has shown can change our brain waves and help us to feel more calm and happier, actually. So now that we've done that, Heather, I think I'll just turn it over to you now.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dana. And I'm so glad you did that. I love that when we start that way. That's very helpful for me too.
Thank you.
Welcome, everybody. So happy to see you all here. I'm going to start with a couple of disclaimers and definitions. So to start with, I'm just going to say that we're both using notes. We don't have everything all memorized. So if you see our eyes darting around, that's why. And knowing that it is our heart's desire that we are going to be inclusive in every way possible. So we will, when we're talking about the divine feminine mostly, but this is in no way to diminish or minimize men or the divine masculine in any way. We understand both things are needed in balance. We're just choosing that's our focus tonight. And that we're coming from a place of privilege and limited perspectives. So please be patient with us if we say things not quite right. We're still learning too. And we want to facilitate conversation. We want to grow and we want to learn. And we will welcome your interaction at the end after we've done our talking because we learn from each other, right? And then finally, this is not intended in any way to be medical advice or mental health advice or legal advice. We are just sharing our opinions and some of the things that we've found useful. So for definitions, I'll just sort of throw it out there. If we're talking male, female, we're talking about the biological sex assigned at birth. But when we're talking about the feminine and the masculine, we're talking about energies and qualities that all humans possess. And specifically, when we're talking about the divine feminine, as we will be talking mostly about, we're talking about a way of being, like a loving, gentleness, vulnerability, nurturing, that way of being, sensitivity, growth, slow unfolding, that sort of thing. And when we're talking about divine masculine, it's more of those qualities that are like driven, logic, leadership, protection, action, strength, that sort of thing. So that's sort of the definitions. The Coast Salish, which is the land I am on, they talk about the eagle representing a perfect balance of those two, the divine masculine and divine feminine being the wings that keep them in balance, and that both are necessary. That's how we achieve harmony. We also want to recognize that the purpose of this talk is to focus on living out the divine feminine a little more intentionally, regardless of what your gender is or what your orientation is. And then the way that the evening is going to go, just sort of the plan for the evening is Dana and I will both give a brief introduction about who we are and why we're passionate about all of this. And we will explain what our objectives are in the conversation. And we will share from our perspectives and using a little bit of science, a little bit of research. And specifically, we're going to focus on women's health and psychedelics, as well as sorry, my notes are falling. As well as the rising of the divine feminine in the psychedelic space. So we expect that Dan and I will probably talk for about a half hour, maybe a smidgen longer, and then we'll open it up to your thoughts and your perspectives and experiences and questions and comments and all of that. So I will pass it back to you, Dana, for your introduction of who you are.
Okay, well, as I said, I'm a psychedelics educator and facilitator. I've been doing this work full time for about 4 years. And I have also been super passionate about elevating and celebrating women in general for decades. I think it really started for me. I had a career, I grew up the leadership ranks in high technology. So I was a visible minority for most of my career. And, I think that that's where this passion for elevating and supporting women came from. As I became a leader, I felt like it was almost like a divine responsibility to let other women see that women can do this and to help them to do the same. Other people that that are in my life have told me that this is actually a divine mission from past lives for me. Which sounds kind of woo, but the thing is, every time I try to get away, like go in another direction, something really brings me back to working with women, supporting women, elevating women. Back when I was in the tech world, I started an organization called Future Women. It was an organization for all genders who were really passionate about creating balance, gender balance in the tech world. I went on to found another nonprofit called the Women's Collaborative Hub, and that was an organization developed to really elevate and celebrate the unsung women heroes in all our communities that make our communities what they are behind the scenes, the super moms, the caregivers, the first responders, things like that. In the psychedelic realm, I run Vancouver Women in Psychedelics, and I also co-founded Sisters in Psychedelics and ran a really successful global summit in 2022, the Sisters in Psychedelics Summit, that uniquely combated the over-inclusion of male presenters at psychedelic conferences around the world by featuring 100% female and women voices, presenters on the stage. We had done a survey of all the psychedelic conferences around the world in the 2 years prior to the summit that found that the average ratio of male to female presenters, so the perspectives that we were getting, was 8 male voices to 1 female voice. So I became really passionate about making sure that we were included and our voices were elevated as well. Something that is really bringing my heart a lot of passion these days is the work that I'm doing with gathering groups, specifically with our women-only groups. Now, we have co-ed groups, we have men's-only groups, but just having this opportunity to facilitate groups of women and sharing the experiences that are unique to us as women in the psychedelic space has just like reignited this passion in me for working with and for the divine feminine and women. And it's really kind of what's driven me to want to co-create this presentation with my colleague Heather today. So that's kind of my driving force behind what I'm doing and why I'm here talking with you guys today. And Heather, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit more as well?
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I'll start with currently. So currently, yes, I'm one of the co-founders of Gathering together with my husband, which we've talked a little bit about. For me, what I love so much about it is the concept that we heal in community, that when we're co-regulating with one another, our healing is so transformative and longer lasting than when we try to do it on our own. We've been official as Gathering Group since September of 2022, so almost 2 years now, unofficially for about an extra year, so about 3 years. And we've ran about 50 groups through, and they're generally between 6 to 8 people per group. So we've had quite a bit of experience with that, and very much a feminine sort of approach, the way we do medicine and the way we do our groups. What my main career has been most of my life is a teacher. So I've been a teacher for 29 years, mostly in grade 4 and 5, also teaching music. And teaching has been my passion. I have loved it so much. I love being in the classroom with kids. And I feel like that my strength in the classroom is what I've brought to Gathering. So I loved creating spaces at school where kids felt safe, where they could belong, where they felt loved and seen and heard, because that's when learning takes place. When they feel all of those safe pieces in place, they really can learn. And interacting tons with women. So, the children aside, usually it was their moms that I was interacting with when I was talking with people at home. Being in an elementary school for probably the last 5 years, we've had an exclusively all female staff, which has, it's been mostly female most of the time. So yeah, that's been my teaching experience. I'm also a registered clinical counselor. I got my master's degree in counseling in 2013. I did my doula training many years ago, about 20 years ago. And that has been hugely useful in this space. I had no idea until the very first time I ever held space for somebody doing a psychedelic journey, how incredibly alike holding space for a laboring woman is to holding space for somebody who's in an altered state. So that's been really useful. And then finally, and my most important role, I'm a wife and mother. And my kids, I've got 4 adult daughters. So there again, surrounded by females, lots of females in my life. They're all in their 20s now. And it was actually our oldest daughter who first introduced me to psychedelics, to the mushroom. And she had a journey at 16, came home and said, "Okay, mom and dad, don't be mad, but I need to tell you something," and told us about her experience. And it was so incredibly transformative for her. And it blew my mind in so many ways. First of all, she met the divine and was so excited and so transformed by what she experienced on her journey. And then, secondly, the divine that she spoke of was in such stark contrast to the idea of God that I had grown up with, being raised in a Christian church situation. So I had had this masculine, rule keeping God. And when my daughter told me about what she had experienced, it was so, so, so in contrast to what I had experienced. And that really, really opened my eyes to the possibilities. It just blew open everything that I had ever thought possible and widened my worldview incredibly. Yeah, so that's a bit about me. And Dana, I'll pass it back to you.
Thanks, Heather. Yeah, I just want to come back to, why we're hosting this conversation again today. It's just from what Heather and I have experienced, what we've witnessed, and then backed by research, backed by evidence, we just feel it's important for all genders to open up conversations that center the feminine, that center the feminine and female in the psychedelic space, so that we can work towards more of a balanced ecosystem for all of us. Since the beginning of time, from the ancient goddesses all the way back to the original curanderos, women and plant medicine have been intricately linked. And as psychedelics have made their way into the Western world, we have played vital roles in science, research, academia, advocacy, across the board. But we have found that so often we've kind of been the hidden history, or our voices haven't been heard, they've been diminished. And we realize that there are systemic imbalances that first of all need to be acknowledged and talked about, and then they can be addressed for the good of us all. So forgive my notes, as Heather said, I got quite a bulk of things I want to get through now. I want to start by just sharing a few facts. First of all, it's a fact that our modern Western world is male dominated. And the proof of that can be seen in such things as the imbalance of men and women in leadership positions across the board, in finance, in government, on boards, and in other highly influential positions. And it can be seen in the fact that there is still gender inequity when it comes to salaries. The second fact is that we overvalue masculine characteristics and tendencies in our modern world. We've just kind of tipped a little bit too far in that way. And you can see that with our emphasis on productivity, on analytical thinking, and on linear progression. And Heather and I have discussed this, and we feel that this imbalance, we're not wanting to elevate women above that. We're just wanting to bring it into balance, because we feel that this imbalance is kind of what's contributing to this world that we're in of conflict, uncertainty, fear, and isolation, and leading, ironically, to these kind of mental health conditions that psychedelics have the promise to address, like PTSD, like anxiety, depression, even suicide. So we see the resurgence of psychedelics as a sign that the divine feminine is rising to create balance where we have lost balance. Our world needs a balance of yin and yang, a reverence of masculine characteristics and tendencies and female energies, for all of our perspectives and voices to be heard, in order for us as a society to survive, let alone thrive. And we just seem to have leaned a little bit too far in the one direction. So let's have a look at where that imbalance shows up in the psychedelic realm. It shows up as a lack of inclusion of women in clinical trials. It shows up as a lack of sex and gender differentiation in those trials. It shows up in a void of research around psychedelics for women and female-specific issues. And it shows up as women's voices and perspectives not being accounted for, as men still dominate the leadership space in science and medicine and business, and even in the serving of medicine, even though women are the original medicine keepers, and even though the innate characteristics of psychedelics are generally feminine in nature, aligning with the characteristics and traits that we generally attribute to the feminine, like flow, intuition, nurturing, and nonlinear progression. It's a fact that in the psychedelic space, there is an imbalance, and that's why, in a nutshell, we are compelled to host this conversation, and hopefully more to follow, that centers women in the divine feminine, just so that we can have a healthier, more balanced psychedelic future for us all. Our hope is that by hosting this conversation, we can just bring some light to some areas where we can be more balanced, and that we can open up the conversation so that we can hear your stories, your perspectives, and your experiences, and work collectively together towards this more balanced yin and yang psychedelic ecosystem for us all. And of course, we also want to use the opportunity here to tell you about our women-only gathering groups. We have one launching up this summer, and there is a special offer as well for those of you attending and listening to the replay today. So we're excited to share that, but we'll leave that for a little bit later. But I just want to let you know that we will be talking about that. So what we've decided is we kind of have two parts to the talk tonight. We are going to talk specifically about psychedelics in women's health. And the other part is the rising of the divine feminine. So I'm going to start by kicking us off about, what I know about psychedelics, mostly psilocybin in this case for women's health. And I just want to highlight both where there's gaps and where there are successes. So there's three things that we know. One is that historically, evidence shows that clinical research in general has systemically excluded females, leading to underrepresentation. So where does this show up? Where is this a gap in the psychedelic space? Well, in 2022, the Journal of Pharmacology noted that only 24% of participants in MDMA trials have been women, and only 29% of participants in psilocybin trials have been women or females. Secondly, we know that even when females are included, researchers often don't take into consideration or analyze the difference between genders, between male and female experiences, and how they might affect the study. So where does this show up in the psychedelic space? Well, one example is the Johns Hopkins smoking cessation trials, which were very successful, but they didn't differentiate between genders, even though we know that males and females have different nicotine receptors that affect their challenges to quitting. And thirdly, we know that health concerns specific to females and women have historically received little research attention. And this too, unfortunately, it continues in the psychedelic world, where I have to ask, where is the research to support the plethora of anecdotal reports and stories around psychedelics and their benefits for PMS, PMDD, menopause, perimenopause, endometriosis, postpartum depression, women's sexual dysfunction and libido, menstrual migraines, perimenopause, polycystic ovarian cyst syndrome, and the list just goes on. Where's the research? I personally think that this lack of research still comes back to looking at the leadership and the voices that are being heard. And this is not any kind of like blame on men at all, that these issues aren't being addressed. It's just, if men are the ones who are making the decisions around this and men don't have these issues, they don't experience them, how would they even know to include them? So again, it's really systemic imbalances that we need to get back to. But there are many positive female-specific benefits being reported by women. There's going to be some new research coming out by Michaela Delamico. I know that's going to really highlight this. She's a real leader in this space. But I want to talk about just 5 of those that Heather and I collectively, we see showing up over and over again in the work that we do with women, and we hear about it. And I'm just going to focus on those 5, starting with the first one being that we know that 7 out of 10 women struggle with their value and their worth. But intentional supported psychedelic use is resulting in women reporting feelings of self-love and self-value that they've never felt before. We're gaining confidence, finding our voices, and cultivating self-compassion. And what Heather and I have found is that months after and years after psychedelic use, women are still finding that they've changed their relationships to themselves and that they love themselves more. This tears me up, actually. And they know how to set positive boundaries. And they put themselves first without guilt or shame. So it's really impacting the way that we think about ourselves and how we love ourselves. It's one of the most beautiful, beautiful things, I think, that I witness in the work that we do. Secondly, many women's menstrual cycles are changing as a result of psychedelics. Some women find that they are starting to move more with the natural rhythms of the earth and the moon. But in some cases, amenorrhea has even been reversed and fertility has been restored. That's pretty big. And women's relationships to their periods and their bodies often change, helping to alleviate things like PMDD and PMS, body dysphoria, eating disorders, and more. Thirdly, psychedelics are helping women's sex lives. As depression, anxiety, guilt, shame are lifted through psychedelic work, low libido is being reversed. And the 2 precursors of sexual dysfunction for women, which are low self-esteem and poor partner communication, are both being relieved by the use of intentional psychedelics as well. The 4th thing I want to touch on is inflammation. So we know that psychedelics have an anti-inflammatory effect, and we're finding that showing up in conditions like endometriosis. Sometimes the conditions are being completely alleviated. And in other cases, the mechanisms of psychedelics are leading to new perspectives that lead to more compassion to ourselves and a new relationship to the pain, and that just makes the condition much more bearable. And this is a huge area that really deserves a lot of research, because for those of you who've experienced endometriosis or know others that have, it's just such a debilitating condition. And just knowing that through the mechanisms of psychedelics, we can get some relief from that is very, very powerful. And finally, just because we only have time for 5 today, menopause and perimenopause symptoms are being positively affected. So hot flashes, insomnia, depression, mood swings, sexual dysfunction are being relieved, which is really not a surprise, even though it hasn't been studied. But what we do know about the mechanisms of psychedelics and what we do know about their interaction with hormones and serotonin, it just simply makes sense. And the other thing that I just want to note before we move on is that what Heather and I have both witnessed through gathering groups is the benefits that are experienced, particularly by women, seem to be greatly enhanced when we experience psychedelics in a container of safe community and connection with other women. So when we come together to share our unique experiences as women and to support each other, when we have a circle where we can show up as our authentic selves with vulnerability, and we can show up without judgment from other women, that container helps us to become more open and more trusting to the process, to trusting the container, to letting go, and to letting the magic of the psychedelics or the mushrooms in. So we're having much more profound journeys when we journey together in this 12-week, very, very bonding and very intimate small groups of women. We're seeing the healing of really deep sister wounds and mother wounds, and bonding that goes far beyond the experience itself, leading to lifelong friendships and support systems. So the bottom line when it comes to women's health is that psychedelics can be extremely powerful allies in women's wellness in so many ways, but there just isn't enough research done yet. The anecdotal stories and evidence are indisputable, but the systemic inclusion of women and females in clinical trials, the analysis of gender-specific outcomes and risks, and attention to female-specific research studies remain important priorities in the psychedelic space. And moving towards more balance across the entire ecosystem is going to help us to support that. So with that, I've pretty much covered the psychedelics and women's health portion, and I'd love to turn this over, Heather, to you to take us into a conversation more about the divine feminine and the rising of the divine feminine.
Thanks, Dana. Yeah, so I'm going to start with a little bit of history. And just so you know, history is not my strong suit, but I've done some Googling, and my husband is a historian and he loves history. So he's told me most of these stories, and I verified that most of them are pretty accurate. So, this is being recorded, so I know we can look back and fact check later, but I think I'm on the right track here. So first of all, women have been the original medicine keepers throughout almost all of history. And they've been the ones that have understood it. They've been the ones that have kept it safe, the ones who have worked directly with it. That goes all the way back to like hunter-gatherer time when the men were out hunting and the women were staying back working with plants and figuring out how to take care of wounds and how to use plants for things like labor and delivery and just general health. And these things were passed down from in oral tradition from woman to woman and generation to generation. So the women were the ones originally working with medicines. My husband had the privilege to go to Greece this past summer, a year ago, and visited the Temple of Eleusis. And in ancient Greece, like 1500 years or 1500 BC, rather, potentially longer ago, they were using plants in ceremony. And once a year, they would have 5,000 people would come to the temple and they would journey together. And it was a really special, unique time because it was open and available for everyone. So it didn't matter what your race was or what your rich or poor or slave or free or whatever gender you were, everyone was welcome and they could have these experiences together. And there too, it was the women preparing the ergot mushroom and some other stuff, I think too, into a drink that people drank and had this collective experience together. And they would meet the divine. They would have incredible encounters, face their own mortality. So this is something that it went on for many, many years. There's been recent research in the last 5 years or so showing that even the early Christian church was using some form of psychedelic in their Eucharist, that in their wine, it was spiked wine that brought on divine encounters with God. And the practice of serving psychedelic wine was outlawed eventually in 383 AD by the Roman Emperor Theodosius. And some people say he is the founder of all things patriarchy in the church. But yeah, he basically othered women entirely and said the men can serve things and the men can be in leadership, but if the women do it, it's pagan. We don't allow for it anymore. And so that changed things dramatically. Since the Middle Ages, women historically used like ergot mushrooms for women's health things, like Dana was talking about. So, like hemorrhaging after childbirth, they used it, and that was something that was a really interesting thing for Albert Hofmann, who was he synthesized LSD, and that was something that had piqued his curiosity, that it had been used for that, and that got him going on the track of exploring further what else it could do. In Western Europe, women who were the medicine keepers were tried as witches. And they were herbalists. They were working with plants. They were using these for the good of the people, and they were often hung or burned. And this was all justified by the Pope. There was a whole bunch of mixed research about this, but the sort of general idea was that up to about 60,000 women were killed because of their involvement with plant medicines, which seems so crazy. And then even like as recently as the late 1800s, one of my friends who is an indigenous man who lives in the lower mainland where I live, and his great grandmother was hung for working with medicines. She was a medicine keeper, and that was in the late 1800s. That doesn't seem very long ago, and close, about a half an hour from where I live, which seems so crazy to me. To bring it up to a little more modern day, um, you may be familiar with Rachel Harris's book, Swimming in the Sacred. And she interviewed a bunch of women who have been working with medicines for the past 20 years or so, underground, many unacknowledged, but asked them and interviewed them and said, what is it that's missing in the medical models of psychedelic research? And all of them said that what's missing is the divine feminine piece, that it's a masculine perspective. And they said what's missing is relationship to the plant. They're not taking the time to get to know what is this medicine and how can we work with it, not use it, but rather partner with it. They also said that the sort of modern science way of looking at interacting with these medicines was ignoring the spiritual aspect of this work, that there is a spiritual component that is not easy to prove scientifically, so it is kind of ignored, and that was missing. And then another piece was the communal nature, that the medical model is solo. It's the hero's journey by themselves doing this work on their own in isolation, not a part of a group. And there's also been all sorts of anecdotal research done, like at Johns Hopkins, for instance, the paper that came out by Roland Griffiths and Bill Richards that was looking primarily at people having an experience with the divine of some sort. And their stat, and I can't remember exactly what it is, it's 80 some percent that say they have some sort of a mystical divine encounter. And of those 80 some percent that experienced something along the lines of a divine encounter, said it was largely feminine, that it was gentle and connected, and they felt held, and they felt a oneness that they hadn't experienced before. And this was all the journeyers. So regardless of their gender, they were experiencing a divine source interaction that felt very feminine. And I'll launch in a little bit now to my personal experience. So for me, when I had my first journey some years ago, within moments, it felt like from taking the mushroom, I met the divine. And in my experience, she grew up in front of my visual field as a beautiful tree. And she was part of the tree. Her face was part of the tree. Her arms were the branches. And I knew immediately I was in the presence of the divine. And for me, I felt so deeply loved, more loved than I'd ever felt before. And it's something I can't quite explain, but the value piece that I got to experience in that journey was like nothing I've ever experienced before. And I know I never will, but I can hang on to that. Like I can feel it, and you can hear the emotion obviously in my voice, because it was so very real and so very powerful and transformative for me. Um, my second journey was so largely feminine as well, and that one was interesting, entirely different, but my body felt it. I felt like I was in labor for 4 hours. Not very pleasant, physically at all, but incredible and so beautiful what came out of that experience for me, which was really the birthing of gathering groups. So coming out of that second journey for me was when I felt like it was my time to take action and to find my voice and to move forward in this arena. And as my husband and I talked about that and it all unfolded, it aligned so perfectly with his vision as well. And gathering came to be. And I've had numerous experiences since then, all equally transformative and all equally divine and yeah, amazing. And then I've also had the experience of holding space. So I've held space for hundreds of people now at this point in time. We've had about 50 groups go through gathering. And so we've been able to sit with a lot of people, and over and over again, the words that we're hearing during journeys and after journeys are things like, I feel loved, I feel connected, I feel held, I feel like there's a oneness on the planet and I'm part of it. People find their voice, they feel significant, they feel safe. And this again is all journeyers, regardless of gender. So many of them claim things like, oh my goodness, it's all about the feminine, or it's all, women are important, or we need to get balance, and those kinds of things. Like, this happens all the time. It's quite incredible. Um, and then even when trips are challenging for people, so even when they have a journey and it's a hard journey or a challenging journey, even there, a predictable outcome pretty much every time is that they come out feeling connected and feeling loved, knowing that they belong. And many people say they have what they call a new knowing, something they didn't know before. They know now. They can't explain how they know it, but they can't unknow it now that they know it. And it is a sense of connection and a sense of belonging. And then also a big connection to Mother Earth. Many people have a strong connection. And I mean, we hear about this all the time when people have, uh, use mushrooms or psychedelics and do it recreationally. Often they're spending time outside because such a great connection happens with our planet. So we don't think it's any coincidence that there's a resurging in the interest in psychedelics on our whole planet right now, alongside of a rising of the divine feminine. And these two things really do go well together. They pair together well. There has been an imbalance in the masculine, and we know that that needs to change. We want it to be more balanced. And a frustration with the medical model, which is, again, largely masculine in the way psychedelic research is happening. So we get sort of the stories of the medical model being, okay, how do we be efficient with this? We want to get people in, get people out, get them healed, and move on, get the next crew in, kind of a thing. And our perspective is so very different from that. And I think what the research supports would say that a feminine approach is so much more useful, and it's the longevity of the change it shows up in the evidence everywhere. So when we take our time with it, when we take the moments to be mindful and careful and intentional, it's like gestation, it's like birth. We can't rush it. It's going to take 9 months ish. And when the birthing is going to happen, we can't make it happen. I mean, I'm sure we can intervene, but for the most part, if we're going to let the body take its natural course, it takes time and it takes patience, and we need to wait for it. And that's the same thing with psychedelic experiences. We want to let it unfold as it unfolds and be patient with it. One of the leading female researchers in our day and age is somebody named Rosalind Watts, who's in the UK. And she was looking at psychedelics through a feminine lens, through a female lens. She's female. And she found 4 areas that consistently showed up in people's journeys. So consistent that she created something called the Watts Connectedness Scale, which is something she uses for integration after somebody has had a journey, to say, are these the areas where you're feeling growth? And if not, how can we cultivate growth in these areas? And the 4 areas are connection to self, connection to others, then connection to nature or the world around us, and then connection to divine or source, something greater or bigger than ourselves. And this has consistently been what we've experienced at Gathering. So I got off a call last night. Actually, we had an integration call with a group, and I was taking notes, and I thought, I'm going to throw some of these little phrases into our talk tonight because they all fit so beautifully. So it was a group of women, and these were phrases that they said last night, and I could have wrote down way more than this, but I'll just read a few. Um, Feeling more grounded. So their journey was about a month ago. Feeling more grounded, feeling bliss, feeling joy, feeling more connected, more present. One of them said, I feel like a different person, better at boundaries, less fearful. Someone said, I don't need to prove myself anymore. I am good the way I am. Being curious and open. Someone said, my heart feels way bigger. And someone said, I'm experiencing my core self, maybe for the first time ever. This was just last night. I cannot tell you how many times I have heard people say, I think I love myself, and I don't think I ever have truly loved myself before. So this is something that we get to witness all the time, which is an incredible thing to witness. So to summarize this part of things, we need more research in psychedelics for women's related issues specifically. We need clinical trials that have full inclusion. Everyone is welcome, all genders. And we need to bring back a feminine way of working with these medicines. So not necessarily just females working in this space, but whoever is working in this space, working with medicine, to take a feminine approach, which is what we've been talking about. And we really believe that at Gathering, we have found a model that does provide safety and it provides preparation to partner together with the mushroom to help each participant truly find their own self, who they are, who they want to be, and really get to know who they are with the help of the mushroom. So that's it for my little portion. Dana, I'm going to throw it back to you to get the conversation started.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that. Thank you so much, Heather. I just wanted to add the other element that the gathering group model really brings in is community.
Mhm.
And what we've been finding in gathering groups is that it's almost like we're serving two medicines, and community is the first medicine. We have people who go through a whole gathering group and it comes to medicine day for whatever reason they're unable to partake, and they're experiencing the same benefits as the people who are actually experiencing the medicine. So we take this slow, titrated, community-based approach for safety and maximum transformation. So yeah, I wanted to open up the conversation now. I know Heather and I have just been kind of talking at you for a good long time now, and just wanted to hear everybody's perspectives. I wanted to thank you all for showing up, people of all gender. We need everyone part of these conversations, so thank you for that.